The observation deck of the Meridian's edge hummed with the low thrum of fusion drives, a sound that had become white noise to Hazel Kaya over the past 8 months. She pressed her palm against the reinforced plexi-aluminum viewport, watching the children below in the recreation module through the transparent floor panels. 17 children, ages 4 to 9, orphaned by the Exodus War, now wards of a military vessel limping back toward Mars colony. Dr. Kaya, the voice crackled through her neural implant, sharp and formal. Captain Daniel's voice always carried that edge, even in private communications. Report to my ready room, immediately. Hazel sighed, pushing a strand of dark hair behind her ear. The gray streak at her temple had appeared 3 months ago, stress-induced depigmentation. The medical AI had informed her. She was 32 years old and looked 50. The corridor between the rec module and the captain's quarters stretched for 200 meters, lined with damage patches from the battle at Phobos Station. Hazel had memorized every scar on these walls. She knew this ship better than she'd known her apartment back on Earth, a place that probably didn't exist anymore. The swarm had been thorough. Captain Daniel stood when she entered, his frame silhouetted against the star field behind him. He was younger than her by 2 years, though command had aged him differently, his face carved into harsh angles, his movements economical and precise. "Doctor," he began without preamble, "I've been reviewing the security feeds from the recreation module." Hazel's stomach tightened. "Is there a problem, Captain?" "That depends on your definition of a problem," he gestured, and a holographic display materialized between them. The footage showed the children from earlier that afternoon, dressed in what appeared to be improvised armor fashioned from storage containers, reflective panels, and recycled pressure suit components. They wielded makeshift weapons, tubes, rods, anything they could find. "This is what concerns me," Daniel continued, freezing the image on young Kenji, barely 6 years old, wearing a helmet cobbled together from a water filtration unit and medical tape. "You're training them." "I'm doing no such thing," Hazel said, her voice steady despite the accusation in his tone. "Then explain this." He zoomed in on another child, Amara, holding a metal rod in a two-handed grip that looked disturbingly tactical. "This is combat preparation, Doctor. These children are simulating warfare." Hazel crossed her arms. "They're playing, Captain. It's called imaginative play, a crucial developmental process that—" "Developmental process." Daniel's laugh was bitter. "We're on a warship, Dr. Kaya. We have limited resources, limited space, and limited tolerance for activities that don't serve our survival. If you're going to use military equipment and space for training exercises, I need to be informed." The misunderstanding crystallized in Hazel's mind with sudden clarity. He genuinely believed she was preparing the children for combat. In the calculus of military necessity, it probably made sense to him. Orphaned children on a military vessel, dressed in armor, carrying weapons. He'd drawn the logical conclusion. The wrong conclusion, but logical nonetheless. "Captain Daniel," she said carefully, "may I show you something?" Without waiting for permission, she activated her own neural interface. A different set of recordings populated the holographic space, footage from earlier in the week. "This is day 1 of what you're calling combat training." The video showed the children sitting in a circle, some crying, others staring blankly at the walls. They've witnessed the destruction of their homes, the deaths of their families. Trauma at this developmental stage can cause permanent neurological changes, reduced hippocampal volume, hyperactive amygdala, disrupted cortisol regulation. She advanced the footage. Day 10. I introduced basic art therapy using whatever materials we could spare. No response. Day 20. Music therapy with synthesized sounds. Minimal improvement. Daniel's expression hadn't changed, but he was listening. Hazel pressed on. Day 43. I asked them what they wanted to do. Kenji said he wanted to be a knight. Amara said she wanted to be a space ranger. They wanted to play pretend. She pulled up the current footage again, so I let them. Using military equipment, Daniel interjected. Using recycled materials that would have been jettisoned anyway. Storage containers scheduled for disposal. Damaged pressure suit components that failed safety certification. Medical supplies past their sterility date. Hazel met his gaze. Nothing that compromises ship function or security. The captain was quiet for a long moment, studying the frozen images of the children. Young Kenji's smile was visible even through his absurd water filter helmet. Amara was laughing, her metal rod raised high in triumph. "You didn't request permission," he said finally. "Would you have granted it?" "No." "Then I chose to operate within my authority as the ship's chief psychological officer and beg forgiveness rather than ask permission." Hazel softened her tone slightly. "Captain, these children aren't soldiers. They're not going to be soldiers. They're traumatized kids who need to feel safe enough to be kids again." Daniel deactivated the holographic display, and the ready room felt suddenly smaller without the light. "Dr. Kaya, I understand your expertise in pediatric psychology, but understand my position. This ship has 347 souls aboard. We have enough provisions for 8 more months if we maintain strict rationing. Our weapon systems are operating at 62% capacity. Our medical supplies are critically low. Every decision I make has to prioritize survival." "And what are we surviving for?" Hazel challenged. "If we make it back to Mars colony with 17 traumatized children who can't function in society, who can't form relationships, who can't experience joy, what exactly have we saved?" The muscle in Daniel's jaw tightened. "Better traumatized than dead." "Is it?" The question hung between them like a gravitational anomaly, bending the space of their conversation. Daniel turned toward the viewport, his hands clasped behind his back in a posture Hazel had seen 100 times. It was his thinking stance, the position he adopted when wrestling with decisions that had no good outcomes. "When I was evacuating Phobos Station," he said quietly, "I had to choose which transport to prioritize. One carried medical personnel and equipment. The other carried civilians, families mostly. I chose the medical transport. 17 minutes later, the swarm destroyed the civilian ship. 234 people, doctor. I can still see their faces when I close my eyes." Hazel said nothing. There was nothing to say. "I made the logical choice," Daniel continued. "The choice that maximized our overall survival probability, but logic doesn't stop me from hearing their screams in my sleep." He turned back to face her. "You're asking me to prioritize play over preparation, joy over readiness, in a universe that's trying very hard to kill us all." "I'm asking you to remember why we're fighting to survive in the first place," Hazel replied. "Those children playing dress-up, that's humanity, Captain. That's what we're trying to preserve. Not just breathing bodies, but people who can still imagine, still create, still hope." Daniel was silent for what felt like an eternity. Finally, he walked to his desk and pulled up a requisition form on the holographic interface. "Submit an official request for the materials you need," he said. "Include a detailed explanation of therapeutic objectives and expected outcomes. I'll approve it." Hazel felt something unclench in her chest. "Thank you, Captain." "Don't thank me yet. In exchange, you're going to do something for me." He pulled up another display, a psychological profile, heavily redacted. "This is Corporal Chen from engineering. He hasn't slept more than 2 hours at a stretch in 6 weeks. The medical AI flagged him for acute stress disorder. I need him functional, doctor. I'll schedule an evaluation." There are 43 others flagged on similar concerns. "I'm giving you access to crew counseling resources, but I need results. If we're going to prioritize mental health, we're going to do it for everyone aboard, not just the children." It was a test, Hazel realized. A challenge. Could her therapeutic approach scale? Could it matter on a ship full of traumatized soldiers and survivors? Deal, she said. Daniel almost smiled. Almost. One more thing, I want to observe one of these play sessions. Understand what you're actually doing down there. Captain, the children might be intimidated by. I'll stay in the observation deck. I won't interfere. He paused. I need to see it, Doctor. I need to understand what I'm approving. 2 days later, Captain Daniel stood in the observation deck, watching through the transparent floor as 17 children stormed a pretend fortress made of storage containers. Hazel had divided them into 2 teams, Knights and Space Rangers, a compromise between medieval fantasy and science fiction that somehow made perfect sense to the kids. Kenji led the charge, his water filter helmet askew, screaming a battle cry that was pure joy rather than violence. Amara defended the fortress, her metal rod raised high, laughing as she play-fought with children who had been nearly catatonic weeks earlier. Daniel watched for 45 minutes without moving. Hazel stood beside him, silent, letting the scene speak for itself. They're not preparing for combat, he said finally. They're processing it. Yes. The armor makes them feel safe. The weapons give them agency. The play lets them rewrite the narrative on their terms. Exactly. He was quiet for another moment. Then, my daughter used to play like this before. He didn't elaborate on before, but he didn't need to. She had a cape made from a bath towel, said she was Captain Stardust, protector of the galaxy. Hazel glanced at him, seeing the grief that never quite left his expression. I'm sorry, Captain. Stow it, Doctor, we've all lost people. But his voice was gentler than usual. Keep doing this. Whatever you're doing, it's working. Below them, Kenji successfully captured the fortress, and both teams erupted in cheers. Someone started singing a victory song, off-key and enthusiastic. For what it's worth, Daniel added, if we do make it back to Mars Colony, those kids are going to need people like you more than people like me. We need both, Captain, warriors and healers, people who can fight for survival and people who can remember what we're surviving for. Daniel nodded slowly, then straightened his posture back to captain mode. I'll leave you to it, Dr. Kaya. I have a ship to run. As he walked away, Hazel heard him mutter something under his breath. Captain Stardust would have approved. She smiled, pressing her palm against the viewport again, watching the children play. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, the swarm was still out there. The war was far from over. But in this moment, in this small corner of a damaged warship, 17 children were learning to be human again. And maybe, just maybe, that was the most important battle of all.